Okay, this is Mr. Kusaj. Today we're going to do the notes for lesson 12E, vertex. First, let's talk about what a vertex is. As we go through the notes, you're expected to, of course, copy the notes, but you can always pause and listen to it and watch it again. Or you can put question marks on top of my notes, and at the very end of the notes, I'll flash each page of notes one more time to make sure you got them all. Okay, so the vertex. What is a vertex? We talked about what a parabola is. The vertex is that turning point, right? You have a U shape. Well, at the bottom or the top of the U shape is the vertex or the turning point. So depending on which direction your parabola is going, the vertex right there can be a minimum, right? If your graph is going up, so the turning point or the vertex is called a minimum because that's the lowest point, or it could be a maximum if your parabola is going this way. So the highest point would be the vertex, right? If you remember, we did this in previous sections. Let me remind you again. So this is a parabola, a graph of a parabola. What we did in previous sections was talk about the intercepts, right? So these are the x-intercepts, right? So if y is 0, what are these x's here? And we found out by plugging in x equals 0, we find y. And then we did it the other way. This is x equals 0, right? We know x is 0, so what is y? How high up is it? Well, plug in x equals 0 and find y. Over here, did I say x equals 0? This is y equals 0, you want to find x. So plug in y equals 0 and solve for x. Okay, those are the intercepts. Another thing we talked about was the axis of symmetry. That's the mirror line. That's where the left side is the same as the right side, right down the middle. And of course, it's going to go through the vertex, right? We don't know what that point is, the vertex. So this is the axis of symmetry. We've done that before. So today we're going to talk about the vertex only. Okay. So if the vertex is a point, how do we find that point? Well, we know that the x-coordinate is negative b over 2a, right? That's the axis of symmetry, and that's at negative b over 2a. So we got x. Then, if we know what x is, then we just plug in the x to find y. So here's an example. Find the vertex and then say if it's a maximum or a minimum for this function, right? X squared plus 6x plus 4, right? Now, there's two ways of writing it. We could write it as f of x or y equals. It's exactly the same thing, just different notation, okay? There's a function that uses x and x does this. Y is equal to x doing this. So it means exactly the same thing. You can use either one, okay? So what we want is, we don't want to graph it right now. We just want to know if we did graph it, where would the vertex point be? Where would the vertex be? Well, we know that from this equation or this function, a is 1, b is 6, c is 4, and we know that x is equal to negative b over 2a. So doesn't that make it negative 6 over 2 times 1, which comes out to negative 3, right? So we know that x equals negative 3, x equals negative 3 simply by this little formula here that we have for the axis of symmetry, right? We know this formula from previous lessons, right? You might want to put a box here. Do you want to put a box here so you remember it? this is how we get x right away. Now that we know what x is, now we need to find y, right? Because the vertex is a point, xy. So x is -3. Let's find out what y is. Well, we plug in the x, right? So y is equal to x squared plus 6x plus 3. There's the -3. X is -3, so -3 squared plus 6 times -3 plus 4 comes out to -5, right? Y is equal to 9 plus -18 plus 4, -5. So there you go. The vertex, even though we don't have the graph, the turning point is at -3, -5. I found the vertex, okay? Now, is it a maximum or minimum? Well, we already know there's two. Remember, if it starts out with a positive, right? The function, let me go back to the function, right? If this is positive, then it's going to be a regular pointing up parabola. If this is negative, then it's pointing down. So since A is positive, then we know it's one of these. So the vertex is a minimum. Okay? Okay. Let's do another example. Except, for this example, we want to find out a bunch of things. For this example, y equals -x squared minus 4x plus 5. We want to know what the intercepts are, right? There, there, and there. We want to know what the axis of symmetry is, right? That mirror line, where is that? And we want to know what the vertex is, which is what we're doing today. It's either one of these or one of these, right? And finally, with all of this information, we can sketch a quick graph of it. We can sketch a quick graph of it, okay? So we're going to go through it one by one. Here we go. The intercepts, right? So remember, for the intercepts, you know one of them is 0. We want to find out the other one. So which you do first really doesn't matter. What did I choose to do first? I know x equals 0. So what is y? Well, I plug in x equals 0 in the function, and I get what? -0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 5 comes out to 5. So there you go. At y equals 5, that would be this point here, right? At y equals 5, we have an interception. Now, what about this axis? What are the two x's? Well, then we let y equals 0 and solve for x. So there's, let me put it up a little bit. There is, there's y equals 0, and now we want to solve for x. How do you solve this? Well, we solve this by factoring, and we're going to get two answers. But we can only factor. If we start out with a negative. But if you know your algebra, it's okay to change all the signs. So positive, positive, negative, right? Just change all the signs. That's okay to do. 0 doesn't have a sign. So now I look and I want. Remember this? I want two numbers that multiply to 5 but add up to 4, right? And that's 5 and -1. Okay, I'm going through this really quick because we've already done this. We factor that. And now what? And now we set each one of them equal to 0, and we figure out what x is. So there you go. These are my x-intercepts. So, well, this is not a good graph of it, but it would cross the x-axis at -5 and 1. Okay? So how do you do intercepts? You let one equal 0 and solve for the other. Then the other equals 0 and solve for the first one. Right? Start with x equals 0, solve for y. Then start with y equals 0 and solve for x. That's how you find intercept. Okay, let's go on. For B, the axis of symmetry. This is actually an easy one. This is an easy one. This is an easy one. So if we know that A is -1, B is -4, and C equals 5, right? Going all the way back to our function up here. Second example, right? -1, -4, 5. -1, -4, 5. And the axis of symmetry, we put a box around it, was x equals -b over 2a, which is -4, right? -b, -4 over 2 times -1, 2 times a. Comes out to 4 of -2, so my x is -2. I'm done. I don't look for y, because this is a long line, and I want to know what that long line is, right? The mirror line. It's at -2. I'm done. Now for part C, the vertex. Well, we already know that x equals -2, so I just need to know the y coordinate. Now I do look for the y, because now I want the vertex, right? So I plug in the x. -2 squared, -2 here, and then do the math, right? This becomes -4, right? This is -2 squared, which is +4, and this negative was on the outside. This is +8, +5, comes out to 9. I found the vertex. -2, 9. That's the vertex. Okay? Lastly, to graph it. Well, we have enough information, right? If you go all the way back to the beginning of the notes, let me put it back up here. We have all these 3 points, including this mirror line. We know where they are, so we can sketch the graph, right? Oh, I'm sorry. The vertex is -2, 9, but since A is negative, then it's going to be going down, right? So the vertex is a maximum. Okay, so for the graph part, here's what I want you to do. Put in all the information that we previously found. Did we not find out that the x-intercepts were -5 and 1? Yes, we did. Did we not find in part B that the symmetry line, the mirror line, is at -2? So draw a dotted line there at -2. Did we not find in part C that the vertex is at -2, 9? -2, 9, that's the vertex. So you can see what the parabola is going to look like. Okay? I have more points on this side, so I'm going to do this side first. Okay, now remember this is a sketch, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So, ready? Here we go. So something like this, through the points. Okay, I'm getting close to the maximum, so I start turning. Okay? Now, since this is a mirror line, I really have to make the left side look like the right side. So it looks like this is 2 over, right? This dot is 2 over, so I need to go 2 over here. So there's going to be a dot right here. Right? So that helps me. Like this. It helps to do it in pencil, because if you make a mistake, you can erase it. There you go. Right? And this is not totally necessary, but we usually put arrows here and here to show that it keeps going. So I graphed. First I did all this other stuff to find, again, going back to the notes, to find the key points, the key information, and then with that information I was able to graph it. So this is the graph. This is the graph for y equals -x squared minus 4x plus 5. Right? This is the graph for it. Okay, so that's it. For tomorrow's assignment, you're going to have a bunch of, how do you say, quicker problems. That's when the question is, find the vertex. And then you're going to have a bunch of problems where you have to graph it, but the only way to graph it is to do all this other stuff here, the A, B, and C part. Okay, so both types of problems are going to be on the assignment tomorrow. So really quick, here's what we talked about. Let me just flash the the notes really quick. The vertex, it's the turning point. That would be the vertex here. But we also talked about these other points, and we know how to get them. In order to find the vertex, let me fit it all in there. In order to find the vertex, we use x equals negative b over 2a for x. And then once we know x, we plug in the x to find y, which is what we did in this example here. Right? We found out x really quick to be negative 3. And then we used the negative 3 and plugged it in, negative 3, and found out y to be negative 5. So I found the vertex, the turning point. It was negative 3, 5. And we know that it's a minimum because a is positive. Then finally, the second example was a little longer. Here's my function, or my equation, and I need to find the intercepts, the axis of symmetry, and the vertex, and with those parts, I can sketch the graph. So there's the answer to A, and there's the answer to B and C. And then to graph it, we use all those answers, plot the points, and connect them into a parabola. That's it. Remember to put question marks on anything that's confusing to you and ask me first thing tomorrow. 16 minutes and 37 seconds, which is not bad. 16:40. Okay, let me stop right now.